Afternoon, everybody. How you doing? So I'm Carl Sterrett, I'm the company's CEO and founder, and I'll just take you through a very brief overview of the company and happy to answer questions at the end. Will it work? Okay. Usual disclaimer, we'll move on. Okay, so Shield Therapeutics, we are an AIM-listed business, STX, market capitalization around £215 million, give or take at the moment, with a primary focus on having developed and now commercializing in conjunction with our commercial partners, Theracru, or Acrifer as the product is now known in the United States. This is a novel treatment for iron deficiency, which has approvals across Europe and the USA. And it's for the treatment of iron deficiency in adults with or without anemia. And it's an important differentiation in that iron deficiency is if you treat iron deficiency effectively, you prevent anemia. There's a raft of clinical data around this product now, including 3 phase 3 pivotal trials in probably the 3 most difficult studies we could have conducted. 1 in patients with inflammatory bowel disease who had all failed oral therapies, and this is a novel oral therapy. 1 in patients with pretty serious chronic kidney disease-related iron deficiency anemia. And then finally, they were both placebo-controlled studies, and then we did a study versus the leading IV product. And it's generally recognized that, or thought anyway, that oral agents don't work as well as intravenous agents, and that myth was debunked by that study. So big news for us this year, obviously, was the US approval of Acrifer. And we're now looking for a commercial partner in the USA, and that process is moving on positively. But how long is a piece of string? So we will get that out as soon as we're able to complete that deal. It's already licensed to Nogen in the European market, and also in Australia and New Zealand. And Nogen are now properly up and running in some of the markets, and on the back of the head-to-head data that we presented earlier this year, they're now able to go to the whole European market for pricing and reimbursement. And then finally, we have an additional asset, which is PT20. It's a treatment for hyperphosphatemia, which is probably more of a US-centric opportunity for the market opportunity. And that requires 1 further phase 3 study before it would go through a regulatory submission. We're a pretty small organization. We tend to manage what we can manage best, which is the IP of the business, not just of the assets, but overall of the business. And we leave it to suitable experts to manufacture the drugs for us or to run the clinical trials for us. And we have cash that extends out into Q3 2020, and that, of course, does not include any of the planned licensing deals that we're working on, particularly in the US and in China. Valuation-wise, there's a range here. At the moment, we're about £1.80 a share. You can see the range from some of the analysts. And we put this up because a lot of these obviously are able to go to a private investment community as well as the institutional investors. I don't think you ever find a CEO who thinks that his company is overvalued, and I'm no different. A little bit more about Theracru and the opportunity. So first of all, the opportunity. This is an enormous market. Iron deficiency anemia is, I think it's fair to say, it's almost endemic within society. And whether it's in the developing world because of poor nutrition, or it's in the developed world because of poor lifestyles, and the iron deficiency anemia then coming along as a complication of a patient's primary disease, such as inflammatory bowel disease, chronic kidney disease, cardiovascular disease, etc. So it's about $3.5 billion a year, we think. And it's dominated right now from a revenue perspective by 1 product, which is outside of the dialysis opportunity, which is Ferinject, or as it's known in the US, Injectafer. And this is from a company called V4, Swiss-based business. And I have to say they have done an absolutely fantastic job of commercializing this product. So realistically, an intravenous injection is an acute therapy, but this is absolutely not an acute disease. This is a slow, debilitating disease. If you have an acute bleed or you have an acute anemia, it's probably because you've had a significant bleed and you probably need to fix it with a blood transfusion. Medics, when they get taught if it's a slow onset disease, it's generally a slow correction as well. And this is very much the case with iron deficiency and iron deficiency anemia. But The existing oral therapies, which seem to be the obvious route to treat these patients, are very, very poorly tolerated. So this has created an opportunity for these high-priced IV products. But of course, generally, to get these products, you need to be sick, whereas otherwise you risk a risk of iron overload. Whereas with a product like Theracru, what you're trying to do is keep the patients topped up. So an analogy would be a bucket with a little hole in it, and the water's dripping out the bottom of the bucket. With an IV product, you have to wait until the bucket's empty and then refill it. With an oral product, what you're trying to do is put a little bit in each day so it never goes down, and therefore prevent the disease. And we can do that with Theracru or Acrofer, as the data from the Aegis head-to-head study very clearly validates this drug works just as well as intravenous iron. Just looking at the US, big opportunity. So about 9.5 million patients who have iron deficiency anemia. Now remember, this is a product that's approved for iron deficiency, and we think that's about threefold the size, the market opportunity size. But just looking at what you might refer to as the low-hanging fruit of patients who are very clearly diagnosed with iron deficiency anemia, you can see they fall into pretty large buckets generally. So patients with pre-dialysis chronic kidney disease, or patients with GI indications, and that's where we've got some of our key phase 3 data. So straight away, we're able to address very significant market opportunities. But in the end, iron deficiency is iron deficiency is iron deficiency. It doesn't really matter whether it's from celiac disease or a nephrology indication, or you have congestive heart failure, or you're elderly and have achlorhydria. It all manifests the same way, and it all gets corrected the same way. So the whole market opportunity is there for us. Just where we are in the US, so we followed the sort of a traditional route around licensing in the US. We created an exceptionally long list of target companies, working with a small US boutique healthcare bank, and that's been reduced down and down as we've removed some have removed themselves, typical process. And we're now at the point where we've gone through DD interactions, and we're working very diligently to try and get one of those final contenders over the line and announce the deal. Typical structure, we expect it to be a pretty significant upfront license payment combined with sales and development milestones and royalties. And with it being an approved product, we're going to be pretty bullish with regard to the royalties as we enter into negotiations. This is not a phase 1 product. So a little bit more about the disease and the patients. How does this manifest? So you either have iron deficiency anemia, either because you don't absorb enough iron or you lose blood. There are no other ways that it gets created. So in the end, a patient gets diagnosed, they go to the GP. Often they've got a range of symptoms: tiredness, confusion, lack of focus, a whole range of things. Eventually, if they've got certain diseases like chronic kidney disease or Crohn's or colitis, the physician may well be looking for the anemia because it's well associated. If they're a cardiology patient, they've got congestive heart failure, the cardiologist is probably not looking for anemia. However, it's an enormous opportunity. Treat the anemia in those patients, you improve their cardiac output. Improve their cardiac output, you improve their survival benefit. So patient gets diagnosed. Look at all the treatment guidelines. They pretty much all say give the patients an oral therapy first. And most of those oral therapies outside of Theracru are salt-based ions. So there'll be ferrous sulfate or ferrous fumarate. Ferrous gluconate would be the 3 main ones that get used. They're all generic. They've been around forever. Cheap as chips. If it works for you, it's the perfect therapy. But unfortunately, because of the way those drugs work, the salt has to dissociate in the gut. And that's the only way the iron gets absorbed, but that creates free iron in the gut. And that free iron then either becomes really sticky and sticks to itself and causes a lot of constipation and bloating and pain in the patients, or it can get involved in the Fenton reaction, which leads to redox cycling and the production of free radicals, which causes pain in the gut, can cause some diarrhea as well. In the end, the patients just go, not having this. Give me the IV therapy. Theracru is different. Theracru is not a salt. It's a chelate. So you have a ferric ion surrounded by three small sugar molecules called maltol. And think of them as having a strong magnetism for each other, and they're able to repel everything else, unless the patient is iron deficient. And if the patient is iron deficient, then the body has a stronger magnet and is able to pull the iron at the gut wall from the maltol, critically not releasing any iron into the gut. And any drug that is not absorbed just gently passes through the gut as the ferric maltol or the Acrifer ferrocrude. Therefore, some advantage of this, you can give this drug on an empty stomach because you don't need to give it with food, you don't get all these reactions. Because you can give it on an empty stomach, you can also give it in much smaller doses. So you get a virtuous circle with this product. And even giving patients 30 milligrams of iron twice a day is more than enough to provide them with the therapeutic benefit they need to correct their iron deficiency and their anemia. Which of course means you don't have to go into hospital for an intravenous injection because there isn't a risk of anaphylaxis or hypersensitivity reactions, and you can prevent the anemia recurring. So for patients, this is a paradigm shift. For payers, there's a clear benefit for them as well because they no longer have to pay for all the drug administration costs. And for us, we position this drug on a pricing basis about the same on an annualized basis as the cost of Ferinject, but not the cost of delivering Ferinject. The payers save all those costs, which is about the same again. So, orals, mostly salt-based iron compounds. They're inexpensive but convenient, but you get poor absorption, and they're slower to restore iron. If you're not taking the drug or you're not taking enough of the drug, then it doesn't get absorbed. I've talked about intravenous, and you can see the market value here. It's a really skewed market. So from a volume perspective, only about 10% of the market is IV. But commercially, revenue-wise, it's about 50%. And for us, putting ferrocrude in place of IV is the immediate opportunity. Just touching on the head-to-head study before I finish. So this was a real challenge. It's generally accepted by the prescribers, by the physicians, that IV works better. So we took it on. And this is patients who've responded to therapy. And the response was based on their hemoglobin response. And you can see that 83% of the patients who took IV therapy responded accordingly, and 74% of the ferrocrude patients. This is within a 12-week treatment period. That was well within the non-inferiority guidelines. And actually, if we move out to beyond 12 weeks, and you start to look at this study went out to 52 weeks, you can see how well ferrocrude does in maintaining these patients. And of course, in this data, 49 of the subjects who were on the IV arm required additional hospitalizations and additional therapy, additional cost, additional inconvenience. And the conclusions of the study investigators, well, they're pretty clear that this is a drug that has real benefit for their patients and has a real opportunity to change the treatment paradigm. All supported for our sales reps by a broad range of publications, and these are some of the most recent publications, and there are further publications coming from the long-term CKD data and also from the head-to-head, a formal publication for the head-to-head data. As far as Nogen, just a very quick recap on Nogen. So I think, why did we choose Nogen? This is a key product for them. This is a future growth product for them. And yet they also have the resources and the manpower to make the most of this. The financial considerations obviously were very good for us. It gave us a healthy cash balance up front. And then the royalties, as they grow the market, look very attractive for us. We retain responsibility for manufacturing and for IP on a global basis. I think that's quite important. So that we can also manage the development of the product. Bearing in mind, Nogen occupy one territory, so we've got to make sure that we manage different territories accordingly. And they've had a good start. So you can see the impact of Norgen's team, and this is just an initial launch in the UK and Germany, and you can see the uptick. And this is clearly a drug that commercially responds to noise. So the more doctors' doors you can knock on, the more conversations you can have, the more prescriptions you get from this therapy. Because all the doctors have patients who have iron deficiency or iron deficiency anemia. Market access will come from the head-to-head data. It's really a really powerful set of data for us. Most of the European markets are price givers rather than price takers. And on a placebo basis, with just placebo data, it's a difficult thing to achieve. The head-to-head data gives us the armamentarium to go after those good, well-reimbursed prices. I'll pass PT20 for now. And just to summarize, so outlook for us, increased growth from Theracru sales from Nogen. Our cost base is pretty standard. We're a very small organization. We don't have any significant commitments outside of a pediatric study, which is a post-marketing commitment. And our cash runway extends into the back end of next year. So in summary, Theracru or Acrifer, big step for us, approval in the US this year, opens up an enormous market. Our out-licensing processes in China and the US are well underway. With a broad label, growing sales, we think this is a compelling investment case. Thank you very much.